So I guess we'll go to Shaw in England.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. Sorry, I'm a bit of a fanboy, so I'm a bit nervous.
Oh, well, you'll get over it.
All right, cool. Since I'm the first caller, I thought we might start out with something light. So I'd like to discuss terrorism and politics, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Just a little light
let's start with
topic.
the light stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm a Pakistani and I'm an atheist. In terms of whether or not I believe in a god or whatever. But after 2 years in England, I've realized that on a political slash cultural level, I still identify as a Muslim. Um, So I think I just wanted to talk a bit about the the atheist experience of a Pakistani, in which I've spent most of my life as a closet atheist in Pakistan, and over here because I'm brown, the basic assumption is, oh, you're brown and you're from Pakistan, well, you're a Muslim then.
Right.
So I've sort of experienced hostility from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So back in Pakistan, I can't, come out of the closet, so to speak, because best case scenario, I'll be jailed. Worst case scenario, I'll be murdered. Um, Over here, I believe that there's a very unfortunate and uncomfortable conflation of the Muslim identity with a brown identity, especially in the diaspora, especially after the unfortunate recent attacks in Paris and so on, to the point that I barely leave my room because I get into weird social encounters with lots of people. So I mean, so on the one level, I identify as a political Muslim because I'm sort of sick and tired of random people coming up to me and saying you're Muslim scum.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I guess I just wanted to
Let's see,
get
there's
your
a, there's
take
a
on.
problem. There's a problem that is born in part from ignorance and in part from fear, where you have radical Islamists who are without a doubt a horrific problem, advocating for terrible doctrines and advocating for violence and actually carrying out violent acts in Paris and 9/11 around the world. And they have doctrines that, in addition to just the sort of broad scale terrorist type violence that we see, they have policies and doctrines that are, as a humanist, to me, are horribly offensive, in violation of individual freedoms. They don't do anything to empower individuals. The focus is on Allah and the religion. That is one segment of the Muslim population. Then there is another segment of the Muslim population that is not running around doing terrorism and committing violence. And the problem is that among that segment of Muslims, there are a number who, without being expressly supportive of violence and terrorism, are still supportive of the inhuman doctrines. It's one of those, they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're doing what they're obligated to do by Allah and the Quran. And then there are more progressive Muslims outside of that realm, so as we're drawing circles out. And then there's an overlap with brown people. At least that's the way people end up looking at it. So if you're brown and particularly if you have an accent which to a Westerner sounds indescribably foreign, well then of course you're one of those Muslims, and then they just slippery slope right down into the you are a threat to me, when that's not the case probably for the overwhelming majority of Muslims you're going to meet and brown people that you're going to meet. And it's dehumanizing, and it's born of ignorance and fear, and it results in the sort of thing that you're talking about, where here you are, a non-believer who ostensibly or culturally identifies as a Muslim because of this stigma that have been applied. I can understand that. I mean, I don't culturally identify as a Christian at all. But if my family were being unfairly attacked as Christians, I would probably have a cultural link to them that is primarily based on the rights of the individual to believe as their conscience dictates. And I wouldn't want to see
If
anybody
I may
persecute.
cut you off, I also think it's I'm being a bit of a rationalist because I don't want to die.
Yeah. And I don't. The thing is, though, I have no way of assessing what your risk level is. and your risk level is different from mine. And so this is one of those situations where people have to decide for themselves how much risk they're willing to accept. And you may not have good enough information to determine what your risk is. Now, there's a part of me that would like to say, I don't think there's any reason for you to remain homebound. But I don't live in the UK, and I'm not you, and I don't have enough information to assess the situation over there with respect to your life in particular. All I could do is, kind of broad generalities and statistics, and that you're probably not at much as risk or as much at risk as you think you are.
No, I completely agree. The people who are most at risk currently in both the US and in Europe are people who much more visibly adopt certain aesthetic standards that are implied or prescribed by Islam. So women who wear the veil are, I believe, the most at-risk individuals currently.
That may in fact be the case. I don't have a lot of statistics. I can understand your plight. I think probably what I'm more interested in, you were an atheist while you were in Pakistan, and yes. You talked about the risk there. Now that you're in England, you are not openly atheistic, even though it would seem to be in your best interest, in your personal best interest, to be so. And that to me is interesting. That you're kind of culturally identifying with the thing that puts you more at risk than what you really are, and that's kind of confusing to me.
When I say that I identify culturally as a Muslim, like in the sense that when it comes to conversations with people or friends here or back home, well, they know. But I believe when I say that I politically identify as a Muslim, I believe that I feel an overwhelming urge to correct people's ignorance. What I feel is people's ignorance and misconceptions. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm politically I'm a Muslim because I will speak out against Islamophobic attacks, or I will try to counter people who do the whole, if you're a Muslim, therefore you are likely to be a terrorist, or therefore you are likely to be radicalized. I think I identify as a political Muslim because I seek to counter that form of ignorance. But okay. I don't pray, I don't fast. We do the Eid thing, just like I assume that you do the Christmas thing, because, the family gets together and we have kick-ass food.
Yeah, and also Christmas isn't Christian. Not in its origins or in its practice. It's a predominantly secular thing. Even when I was a fundamentalist Christian growing up, it was made very, very clear to me that there are two Christmases. There is a religious observance of the Christ Mass, the birth of Christ, and then there's a secular observance that has to do with Santa Claus and reindeer and presents and trees. Because if you ask people, go around and do a poll and say, hey, what do you think of, or when you think of Christmas, or what are the most important things to you about Christmas? You get, gifts, presents, family, food, and then you get, the Santa Claus and all this stuff. Jesus might not even crack the top 5, even among Christians walking out of church when you talk to him about Christmas. It is a national holiday. It is a predominantly consumer-driven, secular, let's gorge ourselves, and spend a lot of money and eat a lot of food type of holiday. And we had our Christmas party actually at our house last night, amongst almost exclusively atheists, and had a great time.
That's fantastic. And you might actually find this interesting, but I'm not in the closet back in Pakistan with close friends and my family. So we're pretty much, the Eid celebration isn't really there isn't that clear a bifurcation in terms of the secular aspect or the Islamic aspect. It is straight up Islamic, but in our house, we skip the prayer bit or the thinking about God bit, and we get to our families together and let's have awesome food. My household is also, generally, we are a closeted atheist family living in Pakistan. And I think the funniest sort of bit is I'm going to be going back to Pakistan shortly, and I really can't wait. I mean, I would rather be in the closet over there than be misidentified and treated with hostility as a Muslim here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that can get that. That if you don't get to be fully who you are and appreciated for who you are, it might be better to hide and be appreciated for what you're not. But I'm when I start talking about what the risk is, I'm at virtually no risk of being arrested or killed for being an atheist here. And I can't imagine calling someplace home where I would have to hide who I am at the risk of being killed. So, I mean, so there's a part of me that can kind of understand what you're saying, but yeah, I couldn't do that.
No, I totally get it. Like, I just feel that in terms of feeling fully actualized, I sort of get enough of a chance in a house in which my parents are absolutely supportive because they're just like me. I have a close-knit sort of friend network, a lot of whom are either incredibly tolerant or are atheists. I mean, we're a very sort of hidden but quite a pervasive minority in Pakistan. You can't get statistics because it's illegal for us to speak out.
Yeah.
But so there's a high risk involved with it, but there's more of us than you might believe.
So let me ask you this, because I find this kind of curious. Is there an opportunity and perhaps a focus by some of you to change the laws and the perception in Pakistan with regard to non-believers?
It's a very, very slow climb. So I'm part of like a small organization that are attempting to first, we're just trying to legitimize the idea that laws should be more secular and less religious, which is a tough battle in a country that's called the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Yes.
So that's the first thing that we're going for, is to just sort of sway public opinion towards the idea that secular laws protect the individual just as much as religious laws do. In fact, they protect the individual more than religious laws do, and that they're a smart idea. That's the first thing. The second thing, on a more personal level, is when I do sort of come out to close friends who are Muslims, a lot of them had questions. The obvious ones that you've had to face because you've been doing the show a long time. You know, where do you get your morals from?
Sure.
But don't you think, you know, Pascal's wager, etc., 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 all that bullshit, basically. So on a personal level, it's responding to those questions one at a time, and you have to sort of balance this with the threat that this person might just tell somebody else, you know, hey, did you hear about Shaw? He's an atheist. And that person might get incensed to the point that they might come at me with a knife. And if they are successful, it will be legal for them to do so. In like taking my life, because not only do we have a blasphemy law, but there's also generally a social sort of stigma attached to the idea of blasphemy, to the extent that the police don't really necessarily punish you if you can successfully demonstrate that I killed this guy because he committed blasphemy.
So technically it's illegal, but it's not enforced. Is that kind of...
something like that. It's actually really, really messy, mostly because the letter of the law is ambiguous, and a lot of the law, the way I see it, a lot of the law is interpreted and determined by whoever is in a position to enforce it at a point in time. So the cop who comes that particular day just might say, yeah, good for you for killing that guy. Alternatively, you could get like a slightly more reasonable guy and go like, you just killed somebody. I'm still taking you to jail, you asshole. Something like that. I mean, slightly more formally stated, of course.
I sort of liken that to maybe what it was like being in the South 80 years ago or even 50 years ago, where somebody could get lynched and all the law enforcement, you know, a black person could be lynched and all the law enforcement kind of looks the other way and they won't convict all white jury won't convict the people.
No, absolutely. I agree. That works as an analogy. Of course, I don't want to make it seem like my plight is that bad, because thankfully being an atheist isn't that sort of visible a condition,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah, you can pass a lot easier.
Unless you go getting like an atheist tattoo on your forehead or something.
It's like, I are atheist.
Yeah.
Kills
And then you'd have to wear a
me
hat.
now.
Anyway, I did you?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's encouraging that at least people are willing to, are starting to transition maybe, and you said that, you know, there's probably more atheists than you would realize, and they're closeted, but, you know, I think that's where it starts. I think you start off that way, and then it gains more acceptance, and then eventually maybe things change. So that's encouraging that a place like Pakistan, which...
Well, I'm wondering how much they control access to information on the internet in Pakistan. Like, could you watch the show from there?
Oh yes, quite easily. YouTube was blocked for a long time after that video came out. I don't remember. I never bothered watching the video, but there was like a bit of a quote unquote offensive video that a bunch of just like, I believe they're from the American South, just like a bunch of ignorant people made a video making fun of Islam or something.
Yeah.
That resulted in like demonstrations across the Muslim world, and then the Pakistani government's response was to block YouTube. But we have a lot of websites that are being run by Pakistani sort of web people, and they're basically YouTube mirror sites. And they provide all the same things. Like basically, you can watch a mirror of any YouTube video and comment on it and blah 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 blah, and so on.
Yeah,
So
that's the kind of piracy I think I could get behind, where we're desperately trying to get information to people in opposition to tyrannical government.
But the Pakistani parliament is currently trying to debate and pass a cyber crime bill. If you are interested, I can forward it to you via email. But it would accord an insane degree of power over the ability to prosecute people for what they do online if the bill gets passed and becomes law. So hopefully that won't get passed. A lot of the free press is opposed to this. It's been rewritten multiple times because of how ludicrous it is. So there's hope that it will not get passed. So the Pakistani government is not that good at restricting. I mean, let's just say we're not China good.
Okay.
So the best they can do is block a URL or block like a domain name, and we can easily find a way around it. Tor works perfectly fine, like worst case scenario, right? So yeah, the Pakistani government really isn't that good at blocking the internet. So yes,
I don't think anybody would be good at that. There's always going to be people who can find a way around stuff like that, even in China.
Absolutely. I think
it's easier some places than others.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. For example, in UAE, it's very, very easy to control the internet because, as I understand, there's only one internet service provider in Dubai, at least. And I think I really don't know the logic behind it, but as I understand, the more internet service providers there are, the easier it is, or the more difficult it is to block access to internet content, because you have to sort of deal with each ISP individually, I believe.
Yeah. And the thing is that I'm kind of convinced that this is inevitable, that yes, there are going to be conflicts and there are going to be terrible situations, but barring the destruction of the earth and humanity, access to information, I think it's just going to keep improving for everybody. It's one of those things where once something is known and the idea has spread, it's very difficult to contain it. And the world is just generally getting smaller. You have to, no matter how isolated you would like your particular nation to be, the odds are pretty good that you're going to have to interact with people, and that these interactions are going to make the world more smaller and hopefully more cooperative, in addition to getting more information out. But.
Absolutely. And I think I've taken up a lot of your time. If I could just sort of add one more thing, and then, if you guys are done with me, maybe we could move on to the next caller.
All right, thanks.
I think the final sort of, interesting, or not interesting, just like a final point that I think I need to make is that the sort of issue of blasphemy, of violence against other minorities and so on and so forth, there is an urban-rural divide that also, I think, factors in Pakistan. Now, my statistics are horrible because I read this a few years ago, but I believe there is a distinction between being a Muslim as a religious identity or as a cultural identity. And to underscore what I mean, a lot of, for example, I grew up in the city. I'm an urban kid, but I do have a rural background, and I do have a village, and we go there like every month or so, and we hang out with, our relatives there. I would describe them as culturally Muslim because they don't really care. Like, they go about the motions, but they don't really reflect on these things, or they don't really give that much of a crap about what your faith is or what their neighbor's faith is. They're kind of just Muslim because they were born Muslim and it works.
Yep.
Alternatively,
the same thing
you
is
have,
the same thing is true for Christianity in a couple of different ways, but
but on the other hand, where you have religion as an outright religious identity, where you sort of where you want to spread the house of Islam, where other religious sort of schools or whatever, what have you, where they're the incorrect ones. That's where you have organized violence. So, for example, the Shia Islamic identity experiences a lot of violence in Pakistan, and they can't help it because they are a visible sort of identity. So in cultural terms, I'm a Sunni Muslim. So I'm a middle-class male Sunni Muslim, which would mean that I'm probably in the most privileged group living in Pakistan.
yeah.
So you have the Ahmadi minority that the state in 1970 something, the state declared them non-Muslim, and you, in order to get your passport, you have to sign like an agreement saying that I think that they are not Muslim, I think that they are non-believers, and I support the state's campaign against them. So it's a really crappy situation. I don't know how else to describe it.
That's going to happen every time we go around and trying to define who is or isn't a true Scotsman, atheist, Christian, Muslim, whatever. If there's any sort of room in the doctrine for interpretation, then everything's out the window.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking my call. My heart was pounding because I've been watching the show for like a long time. So this was cool. And if I'm ever in Austin, I'd love to like pop by around thread deals. Just
Awesome.
like don't confuse. Just like don't think I'm a Muslim because I'm brown when I walk in.
We won't.
I don't tend to make that assumption. Thanks, Shaw. I appreciate it. If we can go ahead and get Joe in Toronto queued up.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point about, I think, I don't have statistics either, but I think I would guess that most of the Christians in this country are cultural Christians. And, they'll go to church on the
Christmas and Easter.
Christmas and Easter, and they identify as Christian, but that's about it, and Jews as well.
And those were the Christians that we would, there's not a public denouncing, like, it's not like we would go on TV and say, oh, these aren't real Christians. But in church, it was absolutely known those aren't real Christians. I mean, they're not living a life, they're not walking with the Lord. They are cafeteria Christians who pick and choose which part they want. And, there was this idea, as a Southern Baptist, and actually I heard Jerry DeWitt kind of mention something like this last night, that being a Christian was hard, and it was hard work. And it was actually harder to live by, the New Testament law than it was the Old Testament. And the example that Jerry used last night was, Jesus says, you've heard it said that he who lusts after a woman is, or he who commits adultery with a woman is, damned. And I'm saying that anybody who lusts after a woman in their heart has committed adultery with her already. And so on the one hand, you have the Old Testament law, which is about kind of what you do, and the New Testament law, which is about what you think. And a lot of the things that are what you think are just a part of being a normal human being. Yeah. You're going to lust. My favorite, though, lusting after a woman story comes from Chris Johnson, the author and creator of Better Life, the documentary and the book. And he was out, I believe, with my wife and ran across a street preacher who did look, sat there and looked at him. He's like, well, have you ever looked at a woman with lust? And Chris said, no, because Chris is gay. And the preacher did not get that at all. He stood there and said, really? You've never looked at a woman in lust? Nope, never have.
Just thought he was lying, right?
And yeah, so, this guy's lying to me. No, he's just gay.